Hi, everybody. It's been a while since we've jumped in on LinkedIn Live. But if you've noticed anything, we aren't just LinkedIn Live now. So across YouTube and across Instagram. And I'm going to be talking about coaching and leadership practices and getting back into the rhythm of things. So without further ado, today we're going to be talking about delivering feedback. This is something that I think, particularly as a newer manager, is a very difficult concept. It's very difficult, I find, as a younger manager, as someone that was managing teams of 13, 14 people when I was around 25, with some people that were 40, 50 years old. I know that was something that I found very challenging. And so over the years, I've got better at this. As a coach manager, giving feedback is really essential to progress in developing a strong culture in the team. And in our coaching programs, we talk around that in terms of setting the culture, setting the universal principles that you want to operate as a business leader. And so we are going to jump in. Entire screen. I'm going to talk about delivering feedback, or what people commonly call the shit sandwich, and why we shouldn't do this. This is something that I was taught in the early days around layering your feedback to your team. So give them some good advice, give them some bad advice, and then give them some good advice, and then leave them walking away feeling all fuzzy and thinking, yeah, I know what to do next. But in reality, they never do. So here is the problem with giving feedback. Firstly, it's important to recognize that giving feedback is hard. It is just difficult. Put yourself in the situation of where you have done something that wasn't of a good standard, or wasn't of the standard that needed to be done. And you either knew that, or you thought that you had hit the standard, and someone's giving you feedback to say that it isn't. We get defensive. Naturally, we get defensive. And this varies across how you respond to these as an individual, but also consider that we all have insecurities, we all have challenges, and we all have things that we know we're not good at. And when they are demonstrated and shown to us, then we don't like it. Naturally, it's not something that we want to hear. And so that makes it particularly difficult as a manager. And there's a structure that we should follow, or could follow, to enable that feedback to be, that individual to be more receptive to it. And I'm going to run through that today. Timing matters between when and how. What does this mean? So this means that the proximity to giving the feedback and the event occurring has an impact. So if I turn up late to a meeting, or consistently turn up late, and then 2 weeks later, as a manager, you then say you were late 2 weeks ago, the impact is much, much weaker. And this is a consideration that we must think about in terms of when we deliver feedback. Now, I will caveat that with, sometimes giving feedback can be structured at a specific time of the week when you meet with an individual. And what should happen in that occasion is you need to create an environment whereby when the individual comes to that session, they are open-minded and prepared for the feedback that you're going to give them. And so if you create that consistency, it makes it easier over the long run. And people always have a bias towards negativity. So I can tell you something good, and then I can tell you something bad. You're going to generally walk away thinking it wasn't good, and that's going to have an impact on your confidence, and also what you take away from the session. So people just naturally have a bias towards negativity. If I tell you something in your head, for example, don't think about the red light, what are you thinking about now? You think about the red light, and that's an inevitable challenge when we talk around giving feedback. So here we go. This is what we don't do, and this is why, a little bit of explanation why. Good, bad, good. Okay. So let's talk through somebody that's giving a presentation to a client. Hey, I really liked your confidence in how you delivered that presentation. I noticed on slide 3 there was a typo. You'd misspelt their company name. But at the end, you did a great job of summarizing what the next steps were. That person's walking away from that engagement, that encounter with you, thinking, "Oh, I'm really good because I'm really confident and I summarized really well." Oh, there was a typo. It's neither here nor there. What you actually want them to be coming away from that meeting thinking is, I need to pay, or they need to pay more attention to detail. And if they do that, they will improve their sales, their conversions, they will improve overall. Okay. And so that's the message we want to leave them with. But when we do good, bad, good, we're not leaving them with that message. So how do we deliver feedback? So we practice candor. So, being open and honest is difficult. The more times you do it, the more times you have conversations where you're more frank with people, the easier it will get. We do it with empathy, thinking about what would we want to hear? How do we want to receive feedback? And sometimes, depending on the situation, maybe you can ask them, I've got some feedback to give you. How do you like to receive feedback? The majority of people are going to say, I'd like it to be open and honest. And then you've created a pathway for you to then be open and honest. Okay. And we always focus on constructive steps to get better. So constructive, non-constructive feedback looks like, I noticed there was a big spelling mistake in your presentation to the client. That's not great. Doesn't look good for the business. So, let's do better. Constructive feedback looks like, I noticed there was a spelling mistake on the second page of your presentation and it was the client's name. How can we work together to make sure that presentations are of the highest quality and highest standard without any errors? And then you may have a conversation that says, well, we could probably sense check them and read each other's presentation. Okay. So not only have you got, it could be that the person wants to attend some training on writing or reading skills, or just read more to improve their attention to detail. And so we've now got something that person can do, and we've got next steps to mitigate against that problem if it occurs in the future. So that's helpful. That's what we want. So part 1 of giving feedbacks, state it from a place of caring. And I always say this. So this is a helpful one to use this. And you can use it verbatim, like exactly as it is. I'm going to give you some feedback now, and it may be hard to hear. But I say this because we have very high standards in this business, and I know you have high standards and are capable of achieving them. Okay. So you're not putting them down. You're not saying you haven't done this. You're saying we have high standards. You have high standards. The feedback, you're prefacing this with the fact that there are high standards. They can achieve that, and this is how we're going to do it. And then you explain the facts. It's not very helpful, not always, but it's not very helpful. Often, giving feedback and in bringing in emotion, like that really frustrated me. That really annoyed me. That just doesn't help. I'm not saying we're robots, but that's what we do. So now we've contextualized it. We have high standards. I know you're capable of achieving them, and that's why this is going to be difficult for me to give you this feedback. And the next bit goes like this. When you did X, and you be very specific. So this isn't when you send presentations across or present them to clients, they're full of spelling mistakes. This is when you delivered that presentation yesterday. On page 2, there was a typo and it was the client's name. It didn't look great. Okay. I'm concerned if this happens again. Why? Consequent. I'm concerned if this happens again, the client's going to think we don't really pay attention to detail in what we do. We don't really know and value them as a client because we're spelling their names wrong, and it sends the wrong message. The consequence of that may be we may lose business, or we may fail to secure future business. Now, and this is what I'm observing. So in some instances, you want to give your observation of how you see the scenario. But this is the key bit here. What do you think is going on? The person might just say, well, I just didn't check my presentation. They might say, I don't know. I've been constantly, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times reading over. I'm just really struggle with this kind of attention to detail. But the point is, when you say what's going on, you then remain silent. And they may say, for example, well, I did a presentation last week and there was no spelling mistakes in it. So then you have to revert back to the original. I know, I saw that presentation. However, the presentation that you did yesterday on page 2, it had, and then you repeat exactly the same. What do you think is going on? Because this is what we want to draw from them. What do we think is going on? Remain silent, repeat if necessary, and dissect the problem and work through a solution. Now, the other thing to consider here is the first time something happens. So let's use the same example. It's on you. You've given the feedback. It's your job to kind of pick up on it as their manager. If it happens again and you've explained it, the second time is on them. So you almost have a free pass at the first time, because we're humans, we fail, and not everyone is perfect all the time. And it may happen again, but the first time it's on you as the manager. The second time it's on the person that made the mistake, and it's their responsibility to pick up and dissect their way through how they can get better at that. If you found this useful, of course, there are access to fully funded training programs March, April, May, October and November this year. We're running fully funded programs. We'd love to speak to you, help you support and embed coaching cultures across organizations in the UK. And if you have any interest in or questions about that, please reach out on LinkedIn or message me, adam@cvpgroup.co.uk. Have a good weekend, and I will see you next week.